Hi, my name is Mark Bernard. I'm a monetary economist. In this video, my claim is the moral bankruptcy manifest by current actions in Washington is going to lead to financial bankruptcy in the United States. And this is directly connected with its attitude towards Russia, Ukraine, and its friendly neighbors around the world. So let me first explain something. I'm going to give you a quote by Mother Teresa. She said, the moral poverty of the West exceeds the economic poverty of the East. That's pretty apropos from somebody who grew up under a extremely rich place and gave her life for the poor, suffering souls of this world. So let's go into this. I don't think there's any question anybody can deny that the behavior of the current president of the United States is, in my mind, morally bankrupt based on his untruth, misinformation, based on how he spreads that, his attitude towards our neighbors, such as, Canada, Denmark. What do they do? Make Legos? Canada, what do they do? They're friendly neighbors to the north. It's really like a low pressure, blood pressure state. But most of all towards Russia, the friendly relationships and his praising of dictators from China to North Korea to Moscow, the Tsar of Russia, and how he belittles our friends and allies around the world, those who are fighting for freedom. So it would be a hard case to say that this is not a morally bankrupt individual. And when I was a boss, when I was kind of like, sometimes I've been a boss, sometimes I've been a non-boss, I never tried to psychoanalyze the action because that usually has a whole history of life behind it when an employee or a person does something inappropriate. I would just try to address the action, the specific action that happened and how we're going to deal with it. So I don't want to go into the, Jungian or Freudian or whatever way or, good versus evil, although I'd love to talk about that, of the person who's the president of the United States right now. Just based on his actions, cutting off all our economic free trade zones and having an implicit alliance with a despot who's trying to take, world domination to the next level, I think we can make a strong argument, and all the followers and his minions around him and the people who cheer him on, that there's a case for America being morally bankrupt, and that's fine, whatever, judge not and you will not be judged. But the problem is it's going to echo into and reverberate into financial bankruptcy. Let me explain. When I was in college, my economics professor way back when, his name was Tony Alabia, he said who is the most important or powerful person in the world? We all were saying, President of the United States. He said, actually, no, because the president, believe it or not, has a lot of checks and balances, even with the executive order that restricts him. But the chairman of the Federal Reserve at any moment could raise interest rates to 100%, and the whole system would come down and crash, right? So maybe it's not going to be, it would be the greatest Great Depression. So that's an extreme example, of course, but you can see my point. He has a lot of power. And we don't know, besides his just general commentary on prices, what his stance on the United States posture towards Russia and Ukraine has been. Well, what he has said is the current administration is creating a lot of instability, this type of language, which will warrant, I think his arrest, but whatever, will warrant an increase in the interest rates. It already has gone up from 4.25 to 4.5. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that's pretty big when small incremental moves, when you're talking about like moving a battleship in a pond makes a big difference. And with this talk of inflation coming from tariffs and trade wars, there's no way that's reversing. Okay, so it looks like the trend is up on interest rates. When the trend of interest rates is up, generally, okay, I like to get into deep neutral rate theory, natural rate theory, but generally that suppresses investment and consumer spending. So that looks like, the chairman of the Federal Reserve in and of itself will increase interest on the debt, decrease the ability for our government to create tax revenue. And basically, it's kind of karmic. I don't believe in karma that much, but I kind of superstitiously do. That this moral bankruptcy in action is going to cause perhaps a great recession in the United States. Let's take this from another perspective, and it relates to this moral bankruptcy. I'm going to talk about Robinson Crusoe in a bit, but first I want to talk about the budget. This budget cutting, you can say, well, there's a lot of cuts being made in the budget and progress is being made. Well, actually, under the current administration, it increases $800 billion a month. Where in the previous administration that he likes to, I don't know a better word than bastardize. I think it was like $125 billion a month. So the person who has maybe a sevenfold increase in debt per month is trying to, preach to the nation and that we've got to cut things. I would take a look at the, plank in your own eye before you look at the faults in others. This is a huge acceleration. You can check those numbers and fact check. But if you take a month-to-month basis, January, February, March, it's been $800 billion per month. That burn rate is excessive. And so you can say, well, he's trying to cut. First of all, over 50% is non-discretionary. And that means things like Social Security and Medicare. That's your money. It's like me taking my money, putting it in an IRA, and now the government just can carve it out and say it's our money. So I think that's going to be a hard road to sell, especially with the boomers, that they're going to just get huge cuts in their Medicaid and Social Security. Boomers are kind of a tough crowd when it comes to stuff like that. But anyway, where's the rest? I don't remember the exact calculation because it's a very fluid number about military. Military, you have these black box and, ancillary type of expenditures. But you could say that's another 1/3 of the budget. And what are you going to do? Cut veterans benefits? I think that's a hard pill to swallow. No, that machine has a zillion contractors and subcontractors, entire states, entire economies around the world. Around the United States, they're all dispersed in every state. If you try to cut that just arbitrarily, that will derail a long-term process of capital expansion that has been going on from a federal level down to a subcontractor and subcontractor level. It just can't be touched, not in a meaningful way. So that leaves about, depending on how you run the numbers, 15% of the whole U.S. federal budget that can be cut. And what is in there? Food for children, education, roads, cancer research, things like that. Are you telling me you want to cut that? So the problem really is, it's not an expenditure problem. It's an income problem. Oh, and you couple it with, like I said, 3 people in the United States own about 50% of the wealth compared to the bottom 50%. The point 1, which is 0.001 of the people in the United States own over 90% of the wealth of the other people. So we've got this highly stratified country, and you're going to cut food and education and medicine research. So the problem is the moral bankruptcy in Washington, because when they start creating tariffs, it's basically sanctions on the United States, self-imposed sanctions. Tariffs are self-imposed sanctions. And they start aligning with Moscow, not helping out our enemies, ticking everybody off. This is the number one thing, this free trade. Adam Smith didn't say a little bit free trade, some free. He said it doesn't matter about deficits, and I can talk about that in another video. Doesn't matter about trade deficits. It's a binary thing. Are you a free trader or are you not a free trader? And apparently the United States is not a free trader. That could push us down into the greatest depression we've ever seen. So this moral behavior, this moral bankruptcy is going to push us and individuals who are not in the 0.01% or whatever, or the top 3, into serious financial problems. And it's caused by moral bankruptcy, and it does start with Ukraine and Russia. Can you imagine? Let me explain something. In the Austrian Economist, and it was Mises, Hayek, Murray Rothbard, Karl Menger, probably even Bombavik. Eugene Bombovic. I have to check that. They had this something called a Robinson, and many of the modern day Austrian economists today echo this, a Robinson Crusoe scenario. Imagine that you're on an island and you have to fend for yourself and build things. So imagine, instead of any kind of negative fantasies about people in office doing these bad things, because I don't believe in wishing bad on anybody. But what if, this is one negative fantasy maybe you could allow yourself to have, some alien from a planet put all these bad guys in Moscow and Washington and all their minions that support them, not all of them, just the people that support them, on a huge island, on a deserted island, okay, on a desert island, deserted island, doesn't matter. And they all had to fend for themselves. So in the Robinson Crusoe scenario, which the Austrians paint, and under the, moral philosophy of Adam Smith, this private property, respect for individuals, and respect for contracts was the integral part of that they could all work together and build a greater place and survive. But in my opinion, that Robinson Crusoe with the Tsar of Russia, the President of the United States, and all their minions on an island placed there by, let's say, aliens, okay? And again, I wish harm on nobody, and it's a pretty hard pill to swallow, but it's a topic of another issue. I would see it more like the Game of Thrones. They'd all be competing. They'd all eventually go into whoever the quote unquote strongest leader is, and I don't believe in leadership, at least not in that way, would regress into some sort of feudal society where maybe like the Tsar, the President of the United States would be serving in the Tsar of Russia. And obviously it's a metaphor because, and if they even survive, because it takes long-term planning and understanding of what economics is about and a respect for private property. So this idea that we can somehow improve the world or make America on a better platform by behaving badly towards our neighbors, taking a pro-Russian stance, and I have no doubt it's pro-Russian. You can say, well, the president zigzags. Sometimes he's here, sometimes he's there. No, he's consistently there. And if he's going not towards pro-Russia, he's 80% pro-Russia or 100% pro-Russian. Okay, that Robinson Crusoe scenario they wouldn't have the capital lengthen the Austrians talk about for survival because there would be too much grabbing for resources, primitive resources. And two, let's say that got organized into a feudal system, I think there would be like one person on top. And, Plato, he basically said individuals mirror countries and countries mirror individuals. That's the way the world looks like it's heading, that there'll be one ruler coming out of Moscow and everybody else will be in some way subservient. And that starts with the moral bankruptcy of the United States and their leaders. People say, well, what about China and things? There's going to be, people say there's going to be conflict in China in 3 years. Where did they get that statistic? Do they have a crystal ball? Can you prove that? Can you prove it out in some model? Okay, but what I can prove is analogies in a story. Robinson Crusoe, what would happen if you put these dictators, including, let's say, the President of the United States and his minions, who I don't know why, I do know why, they're under a veil of evil. Okay, and that's just like, our great allies, Germany, but in the 100 years ago, almost in the 30s, they were under this veil also, where you had doctors and lawyers and very respected people going towards this evil party. It's almost like a mind virus evil, but neither here nor there. This moral bankruptcy will create such an effect that the Federal Reserve, the only way they can save the U.S. economy from inflation, kind of like Russia has now, is increased interest rates like Russia has now. That will stamp in private investment in the identity of Y equals I plus Y equals C plus I plus G plus NX. The only thing left will be a G component that is being whittled away at its most vital aspects, like food for the children and the hungry, education, road system, bridges collapsing. It will become a dystopian America. And it all roots back to Washington. And believe it or not, it's kind of like the butterfly effect. Their stance towards Ukraine and Russia. So that's my claim. A moral bankrupt butterfly effect of the President of the United States stance towards Ukraine and Russia, the butterfly effect, will create systemic effects in American economic, and we will all be in a different trajectory of poverty. So hold on to your hats. unless there's some, I don't know, divine intervention, or like I say, and that always could be, or like I say, aliens coming down and resolving this, it looks like it's going in that direction. But the good news is, I still believe light wins over darkness. Just sometimes we have to be patient. My name is Mark Bernard. I'm a monetary economist. Have a great day. Thank you very much.